This is the midterm review for special problems in animation terms and definitions from spring of 2019. Now, some computer terms and definitions that you need to know include bit, which stands for binary digit. That's the beginning of the word binary and the end of the word digit. Computer memory is a measured state change. It's either 0 or 1, on or off. That's what binary means. There's only two different states. This is the smallest unit of computer memory. A byte is a group of 8 bits. It can also be called an octet. And so when you're talking about bytes, kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, you're talking about groups of bytes. A pixel is a picture element. It's one dot of light on the screen. A computer screen consists of a grid pattern of dots. So raster graphics is a way of showing you pictures where the image is composed of individual pixels on a two-dimensional grid. So it's like a map. So you have coordinates that show you vertical and horizontal, and that's where the dot is, in the middle of the vertical horizontal space. The raster map is a grid filled with pixel dots to create the picture. In a raster image, when the object is magnified, the dots become larger and more apparent. So the resolution or number of pixels per inch determines the clarity of detail of the image. And it will start looking kind of fuzzy because of the edges being anti-aliased. That means the colors are in between. If you can't have detail, it invents detail to display on your screen. In vector graphics, mathematical formulas are used to describe the shapes in the file. The fonts are scaled without losing definition and will appear the same at any resolution because the formula determines what the picture is. When you have a resolution for your screen, it's always going to look sharp because whatever size you make it, it's always going to determine where the image is going to be after it has looked at the mathematical formula instead of just taking a box and making it bigger as it would with raster. The aspect ratio is the proportion of the width to the height. So in the first instance you see here 3 inches wide, 2 inches tall, 3 to 2. This is 4 inches wide and 2 inches tall, so it's 2 to 1. Television screens can be 16 by 9, which is your widescreen format, or the old shape would be 4 to 3. Production terms. FPS stands for frames per second, which is the unit of frame rate. It's designated by the number of the frames, followed by a P for progressive, which is a type of refreshing for the screen. Common frame rates include 29.97p, which is 29.97 frames per second. This is called NTSC drop frame. It's necessary in early video to compensate for the addition of color, and this is the frame rate we are using in this class. 24p is a standard adopted for sound movies and 35mm sound film in the 20s and 30s. 25p is a video format that was used for compatibility with television frame rates. And then 30p is a progressive video format. Linked files. A linked file is when there is a code that's describing where the image will be located with a pointer to the physical location on the drive of the image file. You need to keep the image files in the same folder on the disk or the file cannot be rendered. Embedded files are when other programs often embed files, and embedded files include the original code in the destination file when you import the file. After Effects does not embed, but it links the files that you import. Now, some classic animators that we've gone over in class: Winsor McCay, Walt Disney, and Max and Dave Fleischer. Winsor McCay was an early groundbreaking animator. He released Gertie the Dinosaur in 1913 and inspired both Disney and Fleischer to become animators. And you remember the Gertie the Dinosaur cartoon where he drew everything, the entire background and the image moving. Each frame was drawn, hand-drawn. Walt Disney was an early animator who became the most famous of his generation. He introduced Mickey Mouse. He started sound animation. He had Technicolor cartoons and the Silly Symphonies cartoons. And we watched several Walt Disney cartoons. And you know the Disney Corporation still exists. So it's a very important company. Max and Dave Fleischer, they were the animators of Betty Boop. In 1917, they invented rotoscoping, which is a method of tracing filmed or videotaped movements to create natural motion in animation. We used rotoscoping to trace Edward Muybridge's image sequence of a greyhound running. So rotoscoping is the method of tracing frames from live footage in film or video to create motion that appears both realistic and hand-drawn. It was invented and patented by Max Fleischer in 1917. In class, we rotoscoped the greyhound sequence that was created by Edward Muybridge. Here are some production terms. So a frame is a single image that is part of a scene. It's like a word in writing. A storyboard is a visual outline of an animation or a movie, using keyframes to describe the action. It contains notes about dialogue, camera moves, and editing. A keyframe is a frame showing an important change in position or appearance, used as a guide for subsequent action. It's used in storyboards to tell the story. A scene is an action unbroken by any change to another visual. It's like a sentence in writing. A sequence is a series of scenes expressing a single theme, like a paragraph in writing. In-betweens are frames which fill in the gradual changes between the keyframes to create the illusion of a smooth movement. So these would be the keyframes, and then these would be the in-betweens. Now, the rule of thirds is the way that you can organize the space on your frame. The rule of thirds divides an image plane into 9 equal zones by placing 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. The space is organized to relate objects to the grid structure. Photography, film, painting, and other fields use this theory. This is a painting by Edward Hopper. It's called Cape Cod Afternoon. So in the Gestalt principles, we've got the concept that parts of a visual image may be considered, analyzed, and evaluated as distinct components because they have to explain why there is a theory. And then the whole of a visual image is different from and greater than the sum of its parts. One of the most important ideas in Gestalt is that figure and ground are important. So figure is the positive image and ground is the negative space and white space. Figure and ground can actually be seen alternatively. So you can see something as a figure, as in the vase, that then becomes ground, which means it becomes the background between 2 faces. So figure and ground, you can flip figure and ground. In equilibrium, that says that every psychological field tends towards order, balance, and maximum efficiency. So if something is not balanced, your mind will try to figure out why it isn't balanced, and it will start looking at the different parts and trying to balance them. Isomorphic correspondence Experiences of people, both physical and psychological, are recalled and triggered by specific visual images. So this is why we understand a stop sign or a caution sign. This is why we look at look at a snowflake and think of cold. Different images will have different meanings. The stoplight, you can see green means go, red means stop, yellow means caution. And closure, we have a natural tendency to close gaps and complete an unfinished form. Proximity, closer parts, form groups by visually uniting. Continuation, the organization and perception leads the eye to continue along and beyond a straight line or curve. This is why arrows work. And similarity, identical visual units will be seen together in groups. Similar objects are defined by shape, size, color, and direction. In a herd of cattle, we perceive Black Angus and Red Herefords as separate groups. This is also the way that we can tell who is on what team when we're watching a basketball game. We use color theory often to organize our space. So here's a painting by John Singer Sargent called White Ships. Warm colors, magenta, red, orange, and yellow, will come forward visually and dominate the space, but cool colors like green, blue, and violet will tend to recede. Colors can be warmed or cooled by mixing with other hues. Saturated colors will come forward, so even a cool color will come forward if it's a very saturated color, and desaturated colors recede. The comparison and contrast determines the effect. And then dominant versus subordinate. Use the placement, size, and relationships between objects to tell your audience what is important, how it is related to the space and to other objects, and what your animation means. Larger objects will be seen as more important. Objects in the foreground have more importance than objects in the background. Dominance is determined by size, shape, color, value, depth, texture, density, saturation, and orientation. This is the Beat the Whites with the Red Wedge by L. Lidzitsky, who was a Russian artist during the Revolution. Now remember, the additive color system, which uses RGB color, is the color that is used in film, video, and the web. Light is emitted from the source. A wider gamut of color is available with the additive color system. The primaries are red, green, and blue. The secondaries are cyan, magenta, and yellow. And when you add all those colors together, it makes white. The film and video file presets in Photoshop and Illustrator use RGB color. This is why I keep saying use the presets. Subtractive color system, which is also called CMYK color. This is the color system model used for print. Ink on a surface will absorb the light. The primaries are cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. The K stands for the black. The secondaries are red, green, and blue. The file presets for print and illustration in Illustrator and Photoshop use CMYK color. Notice that when you add together the magenta and yellow, it makes a red, but it's not as strong as the red for additive color. When you add together the yellow and the cyan, it makes a green, but it's not as strong or saturated as the green that you get in additive color. And the cyan and magenta added together make a blue, but it is not as strong or as saturated as the color in additive color. The 12 principles of animation, we've gone over that. We did several of the tutorials were directly related to some of these principles. Squash and stretch, which squashes when it hits, it stretches when it moves. So it stretches in the direction of the move and it squashes on impact. Anticipation will lean back and then burst forward. Staging means arranging the stage to show the importance of different objects and what is an important area. Straight ahead action and pose to pose. This is when you draw each image one at a time straight ahead, or drawing the poses and filling in the action. Follow through and overlapping action. Motion will cause the motion of other connected objects. Slow in and slow out. Begins slowly, then speeds up. And then when it's at speed, it starts to slow down to a stop. Arcs. Motion in curved paths looks more natural. Everything moves in arcs, living things. Secondary action. Objects connected move independently of each other. Timing is the realistic spacing of actions. Exaggeration, when you emphasize and enlarge details beyond reality for an effect. Solid drawing means just being a really good artist. And then appeal, emotional contact with the drawn image. And when I say solid drawing means being a good artist, I mean having that confidence of knowing what you're doing and what you intend to make. That makes you a good artist. So first, here's squash and stretch. This will make a shape change to follow the direction that it is moving and flatten as it lands. This makes an object appear to be moving in a natural way. Anticipation, when the character is about to make a move, he pulls back to collect energy like a cat crouching before leaping. Staging, composing the stage to draw the attention of the viewer to the important details, using placement, lighting, color, and Gestalt principles of composition to arrange the space. And this is a stage set that I designed when I was in college. The 12 principles of animation also include straight ahead, which we did when we were doing the animations in Photoshop at the beginning. Additive, to draw, then duplicate the frame, add to the image, duplicate the frame, over and over, just continuously adding to the image you had already drawn. Subtractive is when you draw, then copy the frame and erase some of it, copy and continue to erase, and copy the frame until the image is gone. And then manual transform is when you draw it and then you duplicate and stretch or skew or rotate and change it manually, transforming it. Now pose to pose. The time of a move is calculated. When does it start? How long does it last? Where does it end? And the number of frames needed is determined. The beginning pose of the move is drawn. The ending pose is drawn. A position in the middle is drawn, and then using onion skinning, which is semi-transparent overlays, to finish the sequence of in-betweening. So basically, pose to pose is setting up and then doing the in-betweening. And overlapping motion. This, of course, is from What's Opera Doc, which was animated by Chuck Jones. Follow through an overlapping action. The motion of the character or object is shown as layers of fluid motion occurring at the same time, but with slightly different timing and placement, like swinging the arms while the legs are walking, not the exact same motion, but during the same sequence. When the main image stops moving, the parts may continue and then return like the hair on the head of a character as he stops running. Ease in or ease out, which is also it's called slow in or slow out in the book that Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston wrote, but we call it ease in or ease out in the computer program we're using. So in After Effects, when you ease in, you ease into the station. So you slow down until it comes to a stop. So it's moving fast and it slows down as it eases into the station. It's like a train. And then ease out is like easing out from the train station. It starts slowly and then speeds up. So that's ease in and ease out in After Effects. Arcs. Animals and people usually move in curved paths. Straight line motion looks mechanical and unrealistic. This is Preston Blair's walk cycle from his book Cartoon Animation, which was published by Walter Foster Publishing in Laguna Hills, California around 1994. And it's still in print. If you want to buy this book, it is a very good book. You can find it at any online bookstore, possibly. At least I know they have it at Amazon. Secondary action: eyes blinking, arms swinging, feet tapping, etc. Living creatures move their bodies in different directions all at once, so use some simultaneous actions to make it look more realistic. So you can see he's swinging his arm, moving his legs, his hair is bouncing, his eyes are opening and closing, so there's a lot of secondary action. Timing. The real world has realistic timing. Things can only happen at a certain speed. To make your animations look more realistic, use your timeline to organize the motions and make it seem believable. Sometimes it's a good idea to have a video or something that you're watching to make sure you know how long it's going to take for this particular action to take place, or to somehow simulate the action and then count with it, 1/1000, 2/1000, and figure out how many seconds it takes, and then you can calculate how many frames you will need. Exaggeration. This is when you use exaggeration, making something more. So use skillfully and in careful doses. Exaggeration can add humor, liveliness, and improve the impact of your message, as well as draw the attention of the viewer. So his head is exaggerated. His feet are exaggerated. The curve of his little beard is exaggerated. Betty Boop's head is bigger than a normal head. That's exaggerated. Her eyes are huge. That's exaggerated. So these are different things that have been done for the effect that they have. And then solid drawing. A good understanding of visual principles, like how we understand two-dimensional and three-dimensional space, how to show mass, weight, and materials in a convincing way. In other words, being a good artist. So here's a picture that Albrecht Dürer did of a figure of a woman in motion. And you can see that just getting the proportions of the figure and the way that a figure moves. He was not interested in doing a stylized figure here. This is not somebody who's supposed to look attractive. This is supposed to look like a realistic human being. And it looks very convincing. So maybe his final product would not have the exact look of this, but he has to understand how people really look before he can do someone that looks beautiful. Appeal. Giving the character personality, the appearance of emotional depth. Kittens have appeal. This little whatever kind of marsupial he is has appeal. But so do alligators, because they have a personality. You wouldn't want to hug it. Creating an emotional reaction to a perceived personality, positive or negative. Now you got to remember, this is a different term. This is not related to the principles of animation. This is the persistence of vision. The eye sees images in sequence, changing quickly, and the images persist on the retina until they are replaced by the next image. They are interpreted by the brain's smooth motion. This concept is the basis for movies, video, animation, etc. An early device for showing animation was the phenakistoscope, or also called the phantoscope. And this is what it was. It was a disc with images on it, and you would look through the slots and hold it in front of a mirror and spin it, and then it looked like the image was actually moving. And this is because of the persistence of vision. Now, scene transitions. A fade or crossfade, the gradual appearance or disappearance of a scene to black. Fades separate major sequences of action, suggest a lapse of time or a change of location, and the length of the fade will determine the dramatic effect. Venetian blinds. Venetian blinds is a type of wipe. In a wipe, the current scene is displaced by a following scene with a distinct edge between. In this case, the shape of the blinds is a set of parallel bars which grow or shrink to reveal the next scene. And then a straight wipe, this is a diagonal wipe that displaced one scene with another with a distinct edge between. Unfortunately, in PowerPoint, you can't choose how distinct your edge is, so there's a lot of fuzziness along the edge there because it's got a lot of feathering. But in this case, the first scene moves from the right to really reveal the next scene, and the edge is feathered to create a smooth transition, so you can see what that looks like. Then an iris wipe or a circle wipe. The iris or circle wipe displaces the following scene with a round or oval shape, which grows or shrinks to reveal the next scene. Some file formats or extensions that we have used in this class. The PSD, which is a proprietary file format for Photoshop. It's raster with vector capabilities. The text layers in Photoshop files can be converted to editable text in After Effects. The AI is the proprietary file format for Adobe Illustrator. Vector-based images and graphics. Vector art can be converted to After Effects shape layers. Illustrator layers can be continuously rasterized for sharper resolution. An AEP is the proprietary file format for Adobe After Effects. It's a project file. After Effects is a visual effects and compositing application used for motion graphics and film production. The MP4 or MPEG-4 Part 14 is a digital media format based on QuickTime for compressed video files. The MP3, which is MPEG-1 or MPEG-2 Audio Layer 3, is a compressed audio coding format for digital audio. AIFF is the Audio Interchange File Format, a digital audio file format developed by Apple Incorporated in 1988. And the WAV is a waveform audio file format, an audio file format standard developed for storing audio on PCs, a Windows and IBM audio file format. These are all things that we have used. So remember which ones they are, be able to separate which ones are audio, which ones are graphics, and which ones are the project file for After Effects. So import options. When you import as footage, the file is imported without layers. Audio files are considered footage because they only have one layer. A composition is when Photoshop or Illustrator files are imported as a composition. All the layers are available to be edited separately. And if you import as composition, retain layer sizes. When PSD or AI files are imported with retained layer sizes, the anchor points are placed relative to the center of the object on each layer instead of the entire file boundaries. Some keyboard shortcuts that we have used in class. Now I will tell you right off, the most important one is Command S to save your file. Remember to save your file frequently. When you're using After Effects, if you press U, it will reveal all the keyframes that have been created for the current layer, or if no layer is selected, it will reveal all keyframes for the current comp. It also will reveal any changes you have made for animation. But the most important thing is the keyframes. LL, when you have an audio file and you have it selected, it will reveal the audio waveform for the sound layer. V will get you the selection tool when you have another tool selected. P will reveal the position transforms for the current layer. T reveals the opacity transforms for the current layer. R reveals rotation transforms for the current layer. S reveals scale transforms for the current layer. W will select the rotation tool, so you can rotate things directly in the composition window. Y will select the anchor point pan behind tool, so you can move where the center of rotation is for that layer. The left bracket moves the endpoint of the selected layer to the current CTI position, and the right bracket moves the out point of selected layer to the current CTI position. Then universal keyboard shortcuts that work in just about every program. Command Z will undo, so it undoes the previous action. Command A selects all, and Command S will save your file. So I hope that this will help you study for the midterm.